Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm your entrepreneurship tutor, Professor Henry Buisa of Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology here in Kenya. Recently, President Ruto announced that the Cooperative Ministry and hustler funds were going to be established. Yes, the Cooperative Ministry existed during the reign of Honorable Kibaki, rest in peace. The then minister, also rest in peace, Joe Nyaga, with his assistant Lina Chebi Kilimo, invited me to go around the country with them to inculcate an entrepreneurship culture in the cooperative movement. From here, we moved around the continent, South Africa, and so on, and we discovered that the cooperative movement was most developed in Kenya, and it was contributing a lot to the GDP. The SACCOs were making enormous savings. So when the Uhuru regime abolished or removed or reduced the Ministry of Cooperative to a mere department, we lamented. We cried for its return. And therefore, by returning it, many people are happy. Let's listen to President Ruto as he reintroduces the Cooperative Ministry and announces the Hustler Fund.
Ladies and gentlemen, we shall implement the Hustler Fund, dedicated to the capitalization of micro, small, and medium enterprises through chamas, SACCOs, and cooperatives to make credit available on affordable terms that do not require unnecessary collateral. To implement all these interventions, we shall establish a Ministry of Cooperatives and SME Development mandated to ensure that every small business has secure property rights, access to finance, and a supportive regulatory framework.
Yes, the Ministry of Cooperatives coming back, and a new fund, the Hustler Fund, has been announced. But I want to say that to add value to the ministry, we need an entrepreneurship culture, an entrepreneurship policy. The same goes with the funds. I supervised a student PhD who analyzed funds such as Uwezo Fund, such as Women's Fund, and other funds that have been formed before, and analyzed the entrepreneurship policy in them. Let's listen to my student. One of my students of PhD, Margaret Guru, identified that gap and thought that we are using the term SME policy and entrepreneurship policy synonymously, and therefore retarding the actual contribution that entrepreneurship can develop. She did a lot of preliminary research, literature review, and indeed found, using the classroom knowledge theory that we taught her, found that gap, which is true, that in Kenya, for example, we have an SME policy. We've had it for a long time, but we do not have an entrepreneurship policy. And therefore, under my supervision and my colleague, Professor Kihoro, we guided Margaret Baruguru to come up, actually, to my best knowledge, it is the first research on entrepreneurship policy in Kenya, and probably continent-wise, because I've also done a lot of reading and a lot of research, and I found that that is a gray area. So Margaret went out to study the aspect of entrepreneurship policy and SME policy, and she came with very good results. I'm hoping that the results of this student can be used, then converted to a cabinet paper if need be, and we now generate an add-on policy on SMEs so that we now incorporate entrepreneurship as a policy in our development agenda. I want to hand you over to Margaret to talk a little bit about what she knows about entrepreneurship. Today is her big day. She's going to defend her PhD research findings on entrepreneurship policy. So, welcome, Margaret Waruguru.
Hi everyone, my name is Margaret Waruguru. I've been a student of Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology since the year 2006, where I joined the College of Human Resource Development as an undergraduate student pursuing Bachelor's of Commerce, and then moved on to my Master's in Entrepreneurship and finally PhD in Entrepreneurship. When I started off with the Masters in Entrepreneurship, I felt a bit lost because at this point you look at accounting for small enterprises, marketing for small enterprises, which felt like I was going to a lower scale compared to what I had done in Bachelor's of Commerce. But it was until I encountered Professor Wilson who helped me understand what entrepreneurship was all about and how the small enterprises were impacting our economy. And this developed my passion for entrepreneurship to a very high scale. Topic which is an assessment of the entrepreneurship policy foundations for the youth, women and reserve funds in Kenya. Now, there seems to have been a lot of research that has been done concerning these funds, especially the youth fund and the women fund has attracted a lot of scholarly attention. But despite so many studies in this area, none of them ever looked at the policy that created these organizations. They concluded that the policy typology that guided the establishment of these funds was an e-extension policy. So finally, what does this mean to our country? What does this mean? It means that we need to go back to the drawing board. We need to go to the place where we started and look at our policies, because countries which have been able to prosper in as far as entrepreneurship is concerned are countries which have an entrepreneurship policy. A good example is Finland, which literature has what we call a holistic entrepreneurship policy. So for us to get to being a middle income economy, for us to get to a status of a developed economy, we must have an entrepreneurship policy.
What is an entrepreneurship policy? Allow me explain. To talk about an entrepreneurship policy. Yes, there it is, illustrated. And apart from the entrepreneurship policy, like my student explained, there is an SME policy, small and medium enterprise policy. Yes. For any business, it has three phases. First of all, there is the pre-startup phase. Before you start the business. Then there is the startup phase. And then you grow, the post-startup phase. These phases are actually governed by the two policies, entrepreneurship policy and SME policy. The entrepreneurship policy, the red space, includes measures to create an entrepreneurship culture. What are we saying? Before we reach this black space, you have been traveling from the pre-startup phase, wanting to become an entrepreneur or wanting to start the business. Entrepreneurship culture, entrepreneurship mindset. You have to develop that culture, that mindset, before you successfully introduce your business. Then there is the startup phase. The policy here includes those measures to support starting firms. If entrepreneurship policy includes, or it is composed of measures to create nascent entrepreneurs, people who want to go into entrepreneurship, then the startup phase, the policy will include those measures that support the firms to start. But the post-startup phase, which is exclusively or mainly the SME policy, these are measures to support existing firms. Yes, you must have noticed a difference. That here in entrepreneurship policy, we're talking of focusing on people, making them become entrepreneurs. But in the SME policy, we are focusing on firms, existing firms. So whereas an SME policy is inanimate, the entrepreneurship policy is animate. Entrepreneurship policy, measures that create a culture. Those are like entrepreneurship education at all levels, a policy that supports and encourages entrepreneurship education at all levels. Business incubation, incubating nascent entrepreneurs before they successfully start. Role model popularization, taking the role models in society, praising them, popularizing them, so that the upcoming entrepreneurs would want to be like them. In Kenya, for example, ask any young person, what do you want to be when you grow up? They'll tell you, I want to be a doctor. I want to be an engineer. I want to be a pilot. Very few, if any, will tell you, I want to be an entrepreneur. Why? Probably because these wage employment roles have been popularized so much that they are in their veins, in their minds. Measures to create a culture, entrepreneurship culture, mentoring. So that is entrepreneurship. But when you come to startup phase, measures to support starting firms, registration is, yes, I was once a chairman of Kenya Investment Authority, and starting business in Kenya was very expensive. Indeed, we at times lost investors because of the cumbersome process of starting a farm or starting a business. So, making registration easy, having industrial estates or parks
Kenya Industrial Estate, for example, that is infrastructure where somebody can go, start the business, when they break even, they move out and others come in. Those measures will encourage startups. Tax holidays, those are measures that will make it easy to start so that you don't pay taxes immediately you start. You have a tax holiday. Self-employment incentives, giving incentives to those people starting businesses. These are just a few of the items or the measures that make it easy to start. Come to the measures to support existing firms, the SME policy, the business development services, the marketing, the management support, funding, funds like now the Hustler Fund, the Uwezo Fund, the Women's Fund. You can see, therefore, that as it is now, currently, we have more of SME policy, like you are told by my students. Very little of the entrepreneurship policy. Entrepreneurship education is not at primary, at secondary, so the culture is not being grown. Very few business incubators, many that I've seen, exist for universities and for people probably finishing, graduating, and all that. Not many role models have been popularized, and therefore, the pre-startup stage, the culture, making somebody want to become an entrepreneur is not elaborate. You can see again that the SME policy actually focuses on the farm, helping them to grow once they have started. But what made them to start? What motivated them to start? The culture, the mindset is not elaborate. The entrepreneurship policy, therefore, focuses on helping them want to go into self-employment. I said our education system does not encourage our students to go into self-employment. That's why they always say, when I grow up, I want to be a doctor. When I grow up, I want to be a teacher. Entrepreneurship policy might help those people start saying, when I grow up, I want to be an entrepreneur. When I grow up, I want to be a doctor and start my own hospital. So we are saying an entrepreneurship culture will increase the supply of entrepreneurs in the economy. As it is now, many of the people who go into business go in probably after they retire, when they have failed to get job employment, or when they have dropped out of the system. So they go on their own. And that is why we experience, partially, why we experience high startup mortality rates. It's been said that for every 5 businesses that start in Kenya, only 3 enjoy or celebrate their 2nd birthday, and only 1 celebrates the 5th birthday. There is a lot of business failures. Why? Because they really did not go in because they wanted to, because there was a culture, because they were motivated from the beginning. They went in because they failed to get wage employment, they dropped out of school, or they have retired, and therefore the culture is not strong. So even with the hustle fund, if we can inject an entrepreneurship policy, yes, give the funds, but probably also training, or start to prepare our students, our pupils, and therefore that is why the CBC, competence-based curriculum, if well structured, will help increase the supply of entrepreneurs. So CBC is part of an entrepreneurship policy if thought of well. So can we create an entrepreneurship policy to add on the existing SME policy? Yes, we can, and yes, we should. So, thank you for watching, and please subscribe, share, like, but above all, leave a comment. So, have a competency-based day, won't you? Thank you.